Hello, everybody. Welcome into Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Thursday, December 5th. We have a huge show for you. We are going to start off, of course, with a preview of the Thursday night football game that kicks off in just about 10 minutes. We'll also get into some fantasy football starts and sits as a huge week for fantasy football kicks off with playoffs right around the corner before getting into a little bit of basketball talk surrounding the Lakers, who have skidded over their last couple of games, including a 40-point blowout last night to the Miami Heat, and more. But before we get into any of that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Thursday, December 5th. But like I was saying, we're going to start off our show with the Thursday night football game, potentially the game of the week, a division battle between the Detroit Lions and the Green Bay Packers. This game has the Lions favored by 3 right now. This game is going to be massive. The Lions obviously coming into it off of a big win on Thanksgiving. Both of these teams having the same amount of rest, winning on Thanksgiving, each against the Dolphins and the Bears, respectively. The Lions had they both had comebacks chased against them. They both kind of did nothing in the second half. They kind of had very similar games, but when we break down where these two teams sit, the big X factor for this game is how the Lions, especially defensively, are going to be able to deal with the injuries that are plaguing them right now. This is a Lions team that has lost not only its best pass rusher early on in the season in Aiden Hutchinson, right? They also lost one of, if not their best tacklers in Alex Anzalone earlier on. They keep getting hit with massive injury after massive injury. They have the most players on IR with 18 right now. That is going to be a huge story to watch, as currently the 11-1 Lions lead the NFC, but just by one game. They're just barely ahead of the Philadelphia Eagles, who are right behind them in that race, and the Eagles are playing their best football right now. This is going to be a time where we're really going to see if Jared Goff can carry this team. This is a team that has been playing undoubtedly amazing football, right? You have an incredible run game with Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. That's a two-headed monster that no one's really been able to stop. In the first matchup between these two teams, we saw the Lions get away with a win. It was sloppy conditions. That was their first game outside over in Lambeau. It was awful. Rain, sleet conditions. It just was not a fun time for people to be outside and playing. This time they're going to be in a dome, so I expect this game to be almost entirely different than the way it was. We saw the Lions win by about 2 scores last time they faced each other. One of those was a pick 6 thrown by Jordan Love. Jordan Love has cleaned up his turnover problem over the last couple of weeks. He had gone on a stretch where he did not turn the ball over, where we'd turn the ball over in every single week. His last couple of weeks has not turned the ball over through the air. That has been a huge reason why the Packers are starting to gain ground here in the NFC and why they are continually winning these games. That is going to be the key. Jordan Love not turning the ball over if the Packers want to win this game. Of course, this is a division game, so anything can happen in division. But when I'm looking at this, I expect 2 high-powered offenses to go back and forth with each other. Both of these teams are missing key pieces defensively, and I really do like that offensive line of the Lions to shut down the pass rush of the Packers, making Jared Goff's life a lot easier. That being said, this is not going to be smooth sailing for the Lions. This is going to be a shootout of a game. Right now, line, like I said, at -3 heading into the game. in favor of the Lions, but with the Lions taking the first of two in this 2-game series this season, I think the Packers are going to come in with a little bit extra oomph on this one. We take a look at, again, how it sits. Packers at 9-3, Lions at 11-1. This is a huge game if they want to keep pace in the NFC North. If they're able to win this game, they get a foothold up much closer to the Vikings, who are 1 game ahead of them, even closer to the Lions, who are 2 games ahead of them. It would only put them 1 game back of the Lions here. That is a massive, massive win for them. And also, it would give them a chance in some of these later tiebreakers of record against division. That's going to be huge down the stretch here if they want to secure a potential first round bye. It's not going to be easy, though. Like I said, both of these teams come in hot. Lions have won 10 straight games. That's not something that's easy to do in the NFL. They haven't lost since week 2 against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Packers have won 3 straight games. This is going to be, again, a shootout, and I do believe the Lions are going to find a way to pull this out. 3 points is a lot of points. I'm feeling potentially a last-second field goal. That's what we're looking at. That's the type of game that we're going to see tonight. But it should be a lot of fun in Detroit, and I cannot wait to see how it turns out. We'll keep you updated, though. Final score prediction on this one, I'm going with the Lions 34, the Packers 33. But let me know what you think. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this game. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we turn our attention over to the fantasy side of the sport. A massive week in fantasy football. Playoffs are on the line for a lot of people. It should be the last week of the regular season. We're going to talk about 3 starts, 3 sits at each position: quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end. When we come back here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
Feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I'll make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't no place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the news it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh, I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Thursday, December 5th. If you are just tuning in, we just finished previewing a huge matchup, potentially game of the week on Thursday Night Football between the Lions and the Packers, 2 top teams in the NFC. In this segment, we turn our attention to fantasy football. 3 starts, 3 sits at each of the 4 skill positions. We'll talk about that coming up in just a second. But before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Thursday, December 5th. But like I was saying, we're going to get into some fantasy football here. It's been, again, a massive week in fantasy football. Might be round 1 of the playoffs. Might be the final week of the regular season. Either way, this is a must This is a week you have to win if you are in contention right now. This is a huge week in fantasy football. So we're going to go over some starts and sits. Starting at the QB position, I've got 3 starts and 3 sits. And just to clarify again, I'm not going to say start Josh Allen. That should be a no-brainer. We're not going to say start the best receiver, start the best quarterback. We're doing a little bit of these you might have questions about, guys. These RB2, RB3s, stuff like that. So starting off with the quarterbacks in no particular order, 3 guys I think should start this week. Will Levis versus Jacksonville. And he's a guy that's been up and down this season, right? He's had his fair share of bad. There is no doubt about it. But Will Levis coming into a matchup against the Jacksonville Jaguars this week, a defense that has been absolute paper thin. They should be able to shred them. Will Levis in recent weeks has been a much better quarterback. You take a look at the way he has come back since he has been injured. Now, he still hasn't been a world beater, no doubt about that. But when you take a look at where he was before and where he is now, especially when it comes to fantasy points, in his last 4 games, 25, 22, 25, and another 22. That is really consistent. Before that, 9, -1, 20, 15, and 9. He has been incredible on this run here. He's a guy that if you need a streaming quarterback this week, he is one that I'm absolutely looking to pick up and start against a really good matchup in Jacksonville. Another guy that you might want to think about picking up for his matchup this week, not really a long-term option, Cooper Rush versus the Cincinnati Bengals. We've all heard the stats. The Cincinnati Bengals have the worst defense maybe in the history of the NFL. That defense is making sure that they are not winning games. Take advantage of that. Cooper Rush has been getting a little bit more comfortable in the offense against another bad defense in the New York Giants earlier this last week, excuse me. He put up some solid numbers. 25, 24, and 15 in his 3 starts. It's not a bad place for him to be, right? It's not world beater, but against a Cincinnati defense that will allow just about anything to get through, he should have a huge game, and he's another guy that if you're looking for a guy to pick up, if you have Lamar Jackson, for instance, on bye, this is someone I would target. And last one, someone that might be on benches. Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield versus the Raiders. He is a guy who all season long has been an excellent start in fantasy. He's someone that, especially with this matchup, if he's on your bench, unless you've got one of those top tier guys, you've got your Jalen Hurtses, your Josh Allen's, guys in that realm of fantasy quarterbacks, Baker Mayfield is the guy that I'm starting over all of them, especially with that matchup in Las Vegas. He should have a huge day. Mike Evans, obviously, goes without saying, should have a huge day. But those are the 3 quarterbacks that I'm looking at, kind of questionable tier to start. Will Levis, Baker Mayfield, Cooper Rush. On the opposite side of the coin, though, for those quarterback positions, a couple of the guys that I am not touching with a 10-foot pole this week. Bryce Young versus the Philadelphia Eagles. This is a Bryce Young that has come out and played phenomenally over his last couple games, and I wouldn't be angry at you for wanting to put Bryce Young in the game. Bryce Young is a guy who, again, has really turned it on, especially these last few weeks. He's been really good in real life, in fantasy, but going up against a Philadelphia Eagles defense that has come out and been one of the best in all of football over these last couple of weeks, especially since the bye week, this is not going to be a good matchup for them. I'm fading just about every single Panther this week, and Bryce Young makes my do not start list. He makes the sit list right now. Joining him over there, Geno Smith. In his first game versus Arizona, he didn't do too well. The Arizona defense, again, is playing pretty lockdown defenses. These are both really hot defenses, Arizona and Philadelphia. Both of those guys I am just not touching right now. There are much better options out there if you're looking to stream, and I think these are guys that only in last resort, maybe 2 quarterback leagues, am I starting. And someone that I think you could get away with starting, but is on my sit list, no doubt, Justin Herbert. This is a little bit more of an iffy one, and I understand if you don't want to, if you don't agree with me on this. But Justin Herbert against that Kansas City defense, I'm not taking this off of what he did last week. Right, last week was a not great performance. They were adjusting to life without J.K. Dobbins, and that's something that's going to be a real reality versus the Kansas City Chiefs. They didn't put up too many points against Kansas City last time they played, and I don't expect it to be very different, especially without a real run game, which has been the motor that's been powering that offense. Justin Herbert is a great quarterback, but he's not going to be fantasy relevant this week, so I'm not touching him right now. That's starts for quarterbacks: Will Levis, Baker Mayfield, Cooper Rush, sitting Bryce Young, Justin Herbert, and Geno Smith. Getting into the running backs, though, again, three starters, three sits. Starting in the starting category over here, we're going to go a lot of matchup based and a lot of young guys here. Tyrone Tracy is starting off the top of my list here on a really bad Giants offense, but going up against a Saints defense that is one of the worst in the league against the run. This is a Giants team that is not going to be particularly good offensively. Drew Lock gets the start yet again. I'm not looking at too much out of any of their players, but Tyrone Tracy found the end zone last week against the Cowboys. He has been putting up insane yard per carry number, and he's been getting at least 10 points a game in fantasy. He should be able to clean up against a bad Saints defense. Along the same lines, Bucky Irving has been a monster down the stretch in fantasy, a league winner, a guy that you picked up on a whim on week 4. He's a guy that is going to absolutely destroy yet again against a Las Vegas Raiders team that has been the worst team in fantasy football against running backs. They've allowed at least 15 points to running backs in all but 2 matchups this year. It is just a really bad run defense. And Bucky Irving, not only can he beat you on the ground, but through the air as well. He's caught 35 of 37 targets thrown to him this season. He's really good after the catch. This is a guy that I want in every single lineup. There is no reason to put him on the bench this week. And last but not least, Chase Brown. We just finished talking about Tyrone Tracy getting a touchdown against those same Dallas Cowboys. On Monday Night Football, Chase Brown should go off. Jamar Chase dealing with a slight injury. He should still probably be able to go, but that Bengals offense should have a day against a really, really bad Cowboys defense. Whether through the run or through the pass, Chase Brown has played a huge role down the stretch for these Bengals, keeping them in games that they would have been way out of. I think of the Chargers game, for instance. He was really the spark plug that got them back into it. Chase Brown is a guy that should be in every single starting lineup, and he should be a lock there for the rest of the year. But some guys that I'm avoiding right now. Staying in the Los Angeles Chargers mindset, Gus Edwards. He has been super inefficient with the ball. He's a big guy. He's going to be good on the goal line, but he hasn't even been getting those goal line touches. It's been Hassan Haskins at the goal line. This is not a backfield that I'm really trusting right now against one of the best run defenses in all of football in the Kansas City Chiefs. Kansas City has been dominant all year against running backs, and Gus Edwards is not someone that inspires me as the one that could break that trend. If you're going to get someone in the Los Angeles Chargers backfield, if you're forced to start one, I guess it would be Gus Edwards, but I'm not touching that backfield. That's one that I am letting ride on my bench for at least the next week. We'll see what happens matchup-wise after that, but I'm not messing with that Chargers backfield right now. Same thing with the Browns. Nick Chubb had 2 touchdowns against Pittsburgh last time they played, but he wasn't terribly efficient. About 18 for 50 on the ground. Not a great stat line against a good Pittsburgh Steelers defense. He was out for basically an entire half last game when they played the Denver Broncos on Monday Night Football. They were in pass-heavy formations. It went to Jerome Ford a lot. He was being a little bit more effective than Nick Chubb. Nick Chubb is on my sit list as well. I like Nick Chubb a lot. He is a guy that I'd like to have belief in. He's someone that I'm glad is coming back from injury. I'm glad that he is, healthy and able to play. But he has just not been the Nick Chubb of old that we expect, and I don't think that's going to change against a really stout run defense of the Pittsburgh Steelers. And our last sit of the running backs this week is Chuba Hubbard. He had a awful week last week, only putting up 2 points. he is a guy that I could see bouncing back. But again, against a staunch Philly defense, a defensive line that consists of huge, huge bodies, this is not going to be his week. I think he'll be able to turn it around. I'm not worried about him in the future, but Chuba is a guy that I am avoiding, much like everybody in that Carolina offense this week. Getting to the wide receivers, they're always a toss-up here, right? Starting wide receivers, I'm going to start DK Metcalf. I want a share of DK Metcalf versus Arizona. I know that defense has been really good, especially through the air these last couple of weeks. I think that the Seahawks are going to have to air it out, and I'm feeling a touchdown or two from DK Metcalf this week. He should be able to overpower the matchups. He's getting healthy. I know JSN's been a huge part of that offense, but I think this is going to be a DK Metcalf game. Similarly, for a two-headed monster kind of wide receiver room in Philadelphia, Devonta Smith just logged a full practice. He's a guy that if he's playing, I'm putting in my lineup 300% of the time. He is amazing when he's gotten into games. He's just been a little banged up all season long. Against the Carolina secondary, that's very easy to exploit. He should have a huge day, both him and A.J. Brown, but you're playing A.J. Brown anyway, so he's not meeting the criteria to make this list. And the final one, I know I kind of talked bad about the Giants earlier on in this segment, but Malik Neighbors makes this list on volume alone. Especially if you are in a PPR league, I'm starting Malik Neighbors. He's a guy that is a glutton for targets. He's getting double-digit targets every single game, and that should not change with Drew Lock under center. We saw him get peppered with targets against the Cowboys. That's going to happen against a bad Saints secondary. He's a guy that I'm putting in all of my fantasy lineups this week. But the guys that I'm avoiding, Drake London against a good Minnesota Vikings defense is someone that I am avoiding this week. Kirk Cousins, we don't know the state of him. This kind of feels like a Kirk bounce back game, but that's just going off vibes, and really that's not how we like to do our analysis. If we're looking at it right now, Drake London has struggled not just because of him, but because Kirk Cousins has struggled over the last basically month of football. This is not a guy that I feel comfortable relying on, and if you have a better option out there, Drake London is not someone that I'm happily throwing into lineups right now. Parker Washington, just coming off of a huge game last week against Houston, is not sustainable. I will just come out and say that. You look at the 12 targets that he got last week, he has 13 targets the rest of the season. This is not a sustainable guy. He's worth a pickup if he's on if he's on the waiver wire in case something happens again. But if you're counting on him big this week against a matchup with Tennessee, that their corners are honestly pretty solid, it's not going to be there. And I would not trust Parker Washington right now over just about anybody. And the final receiver that I'm staying away from is Jalen Waddle. And this one might seem a little weird. He's been producing a little bit more with Tua back, but he had a bad game in Green Bay. You have Jonnu Smith, who's kind of taken over a lot of that receiving role. Tyreek Hill is going to command the ball. There's a lot of mouths that need to be fed. And against still a good Jets defense, they're going to try and run the ball a bunch because that's been the weakness of the Jets. I'm just not trusting Jalen Waddle this week. I don't think it's going to be a Waddle week. Doesn't feel like it this week. And finally, to the tight ends. 3 starters, 3 sits, starting with the starts. TJ Hawkinson taking on the Atlanta Falcons. That is a defense that is soft on tight ends, incredibly soft on tight ends. TJ Hawkinson is yet to really have his big breakout game, but I think this is the one that's going to happen in. There's going to be wide open spaces over the middle. He should have a huge game this week against Atlanta, and I'm very high on TJ Hawkinson this week. Same thing with Jonnu Smith. They're taking on the New York Jets, and this is less for the matchup and more for, hey, he's a guy that I'm starting regardless of matchup. Jonnu Smith has been the one of, if not the best fantasy tight ends in all of this last month. Right behind Brock Bowers. He's in that tier. He has been incredible with the Dolphins since Tua came back, and he is a guy that I am starting over just about anyone other than Brock Bowers this week. He's a guy I'm starting regardless of matchup. And Jake Ferguson versus Cincinnati. Again, we just saw what happens against a bad Cincinnati defense. The middle of that field is wide open. We saw Pat Fryermuth take advantage of that. He was having a not great situation with Russell Wilson. This is a guy in Jake Ferguson coming back from concussions. We've seen Cooper Rush like to throw to the tight end a little bit. They've had at least 35 yards, the starting tight end, in each of his three starts. In each of his three starts, a touchdown in one of them. Luke Schoonmaker was the guy, but now that Jake Ferguson is back, he should have a huge day. That is another tight end that I'm getting into all of my starting lineups. And finally, the sits for tight ends. I'm not starting Cole Kmet. He's been not very involved in that offense, and against a really good, talented linebacker core in San Francisco, this is a matchup nightmare. I'm not trusting him right now. I know the Bears might have a big day after firing their head coach, but I don't think Cole Kmet is going to be the reason why they go off. One for Thursday Night Football, Tucker Kraft versus Detroit, another team that's been really tough on tight ends this season. Tucker Kraft is very touchdown reliant, and this doesn't feel like a game where Tucker Kraft is going to get into the end zone. This is one of those that I could see maybe a touchdown happening, but Tucker Kraft does not. In a shootout of a game, he's going to fill that more blocking role, and I don't think he's going to get too many targets. And finally, Kyle Pitts. That Minnesota defense is just too good. He's too inconsistent. Same thing with Kirk Cousins. I don't know how he's going to be, and I don't know if he's even going to look Kyle Pitts' way. He has some of these games where he just decides not to look at Kyle Pitts at all, and I don't think Kyle Pitts is worth starting. So we'll run through it. We'll run through it real quick. Start Will Levis, Baker Mayfield, Cooper Rush. Sit Bryce Young, Justin Herbert, and Geno Smith. We're starting Tyrone Tracy, Bucky Irving, and Chase Brown. We're sitting Gus Edwards, Chuba Hubbard, and Nick Chubb. For the wide receivers, I'm starting DK Metcalf, Devonta Smith, and Malik Neighbors, and I am not starting Drake London, Parker Washington, or Jalen Waddle. Finally, for the tight ends, putting TJ Hawkinson, Jonnu Smith, and Jake Ferguson in all my lineups, and I'm not touching Cole Kmet, Tucker Kraft, or Kyle Pitts. But let me know what you think. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Who are your biggest, who do you think should be your start sits for this week? We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we turn our attention over to the NBA. A struggling Los Angeles Lakers team gets blown out by 40. We're going to try and diagnose what's going on with the Lakers squad, how to fix the problem, and where to go in the future over there. We'll be right back here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Thursday, December 5th. If you are just tuning in, we just finished going over the fantasy football starts and sits for this week. In this segment, we turn our attention to the NBA, but before we do, quick update on Thursday Night Football. David Montgomery has found a way into the end zone as the Lions lead 7-0 after the first drive. Green Bay to get the ball back with 9:41 to go in the first. In this segment, like I said, we turn our attention to the NBA. But before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Thursday, December 5th. But like I was saying, we are going to get into a little bit of the Lakers' struggles here. Last night, the Lakers got absolutely destroyed by the Miami Heat, losing by 41, and they just looked like they forgot how to play basketball. Like the Monstars came in and took their talent from them. Anthony Davis finished with just 8 points. Abysmal performance for them. They have just not looked the same like they did at the beginning of the season, and a lot of it can be blamed on the way that the stars are playing, of the stars of that team are playing, right? LeBron James over his last couple games has been atrocious. His shooting has been the worst in his entire career. Time might be starting to catch up to him. In their last 10, they're 4-6, and they're slipping fast. They were once in the top half of the Western Conference. Now they're all the way down to 9th in the West. They're in a real situation where after failing to repeat in the NBA Cup, they didn't make it to that final challenge like they did last year. People are starting to point fingers, and I know it's early in the season. They're sitting, again, in 9th, just 4.5 games back of the first place team, so it's not like it's the end of the world at 12-10 right now. But people are starting to point the fingers because that's just how it goes in LA. And a lot of people I've been seeing are pointing the fingers at head coach, new first-year head coach, JJ Redick. And we could see that coming, right? When JJ got hired, it was a controversial move. They're saying LeBron hired his friend. He's not going to be good for the team. And there's no doubt about that this was going to be a either super successful pairing or there was going to be a lot of media fan blowback on it. Right? And it started off all good. They were figuring things out. The team was playing together. They had some kind of scheme, and people were saying, wow, he's going to be a great coach. And I still think he's going to be a good coach. I don't think the problems are with JJ Redick, but we've started to see it turn as the team has started to falter off a little bit. But the issue with this team is not coaching. And sure, some of it might be coaching. I'm sure JJ Redick, as an inexperienced coach, isn't making all of the right moves, but he's making some sound calls out there. He's not like afraid to be a coach, which a lot of people thought he would be afraid to be a coach for LeBron James. I have not seen that out there, aside from potentially the fact that LeBron wants to play 82 games, and that doesn't seem very sustainable, especially with the way that he's been playing of late. He seems like he's been able to coach these guys and, actually confront them about some issues that they've been having. The issue is not the coach. They've had 3 coaches in the last 4 years, and they've all basically had the same record. And that's something that I think needs to be rubbed into people's heads, pushed into people's brain. People are so quickly to scapegoat a coach. And it's not always that they're wrong to scapegoat a coach. Sometimes it is the coach's fault. Sometimes that's just how it goes. You have to blame the coach because the coach is doing wrong. But just 22 games into the NBA season, already calling for a new coach's head is insane, especially when it hasn't even been a disaster. It's been bad at times right now, for instance, but it hasn't been an unmitigated disaster to the point where we point fingers and say they need to be fired. And I think people need to slow down, calm down. Teams go through stretches where they're just not winning basketball games. They will figure it out. They will recompose. I am not worried about where the Lakers are going to be. They'll find a way into at least the play-ins this season. And with LeBron James, you can never really count them out. Now, I know they were expecting more. I know they were expecting more out of the team this year, and we're kind of looking at a potential last hurrah for LeBron. I doubt this is his last year, but we're looking at kind of the end of his reign in the NBA, right? Time is passing him by slowly. All these other players, he's not a top 5 player in the league right now. He's still incredible. This is still a really great Lakers team, but they need to start to pull it together. They need to get a little bit more of what they were doing in the beginning of the season, feeding it to Anthony Davis. And Anthony Davis, who was playing like an MVP at the beginning of the season, has started to fall off. They need to be able to, I guess, and I hate suggesting this, they need to figure out how to load manage their team, which sucks because I don't think that should be a thing in the NBA. It's part of the reason why the NBA is the way that it is right now, right? With viewership harshly declining, there's only one way to fix that, and that is to subtract regular season games. You know, I know, we all know that's never going to happen. They're going to keep trying to add gimmicks like the NBA Cup, which I like, gets people to play, but it's also not going to change anything. The only way to fix this issue, the only way to get these games more competitive, more watchable, get more eyes on them, is to cut the number of games or add more teams, something along those lines. One of those is most likely going to happen soon. But this is a Lakers team that I think should be able to turn it around. I'm not too worried about them. They have LeBron, they have AD. They'll figure it out. But let me know what you think. What's wrong with the Lakers? When will they figure it out? Will they figure it out? I'd love to hear your thoughts. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we turn our attention back to the NFL. We have awards to check up on. Week 13 has come and gone, and we have some updates to where the awards stand for the NFL. We'll be right back here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Thursday, December 5th. If you were just tuning in, we just finished going over a little bit of news in the NBA. The Lakers have been struggling after going down. After going down in 6 of their last 10 games, one of them last night, including a 41-point blowout at the hands of the Miami Heat. In this segment, we turn our attention back to the NFL. Awards coming up later. It's been hotly debated. Awards like the Offensive Player of the Year, like the MVP. Coach of the Year, for example, is a hotly debated award. We're going to talk about where all of these stand right now and who I have winning some of these awards as we head into Week 14. But before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Thursday, December 5th. But like I was saying, we're going to get into a little bit more of the NFL. The awards, last time we went over them, it was mid-season. At the mid-season award show, and honestly, has not aged that well, if I'm going to be completely honest with you with where we stood. Of course, 4 weeks in the NFL is a lifetime. That's a quarter of the season. That is incredibly long for what can happen in the NFL. But as we stand right now, we're going to start in the MVP race, right? The MVP race, as it was at midseason, consisted of 3 quarterbacks: Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, and for me, I put Joe Burrow in there. This was right around the time that Jared Goff was still in and out of the MVP race. He has fallen out of the race at this point. I don't think he really stands a chance. Joe Burrow is an interesting question because when you look at his numbers, when you look at the offensive numbers that he and the Bengals are putting up, there's a case for him. But at 4-8, that's not a historical mark for you to win the MVP. As we talked about in the beginning of the season, you need to be a winning team. A lot of times it comes from the 1 seed in the conference, best player on the best team kind of vibe. It doesn't always go like that, though. Sometimes there's exception, but generally it's a division winner. that wins the MVP. So with that in mind, we have a couple of changes. It's still going to be in that top 3, Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen. But there's a new third candidate, and a lot of you already know where this is going. It's Saquon Barkley. What he has been able to do for the Philadelphia Eagles is insane. He has made himself a true MVP case, not something you usually see. We haven't seen a non-quarterback win the award since Adrian Peterson did it back in 2012. He is making a real case. If you compare numbers, he's right on pace, if not better, than that Adrian Peterson season. He could break the all-time scrimmage yards record, the all-time rushing yards record this season if he continues the pace that he's on. It's not going to be easy to do. He's been playing out of his mind. He's been a closer for the Eagles, who are one of the hottest teams in all of football. But if there's going to be someone to do it, there's a real case. This year is the year. You've seen some struggles, some games with struggles from Lamar Jackson, some games with struggles from Josh Allen. Now, they're quarterbacks. They're going to have a little bit of bias, and Josh Allen has already locked up that division, which checks off one of those potential MVP boxes, keeping him firmly in that conversation. He's a guy that people think is due to get an MVP, and there's no doubt about it. I think he's due to get an MVP. He deserves one with how good he is and how long he's been good, but you have to look at it season by season. Lamar Jackson up there, his stats are phenomenal. 29-3 touchdown to interception ratio, and we still have 4 weeks to play in this season. That is insane. His team is losing games, though, which might knock him out, which sucks. I hate that that's a thing, but his team is losing games, which, as I said, historical precedent, you probably need to at least win your division to win the MVP, which tucks Lamar Jackson all the way down to 3rd in the MVP rankings, putting a running back, Saquon Barkley, in 2nd. Now, it's going to take a Herculean effort for him to get that MVP. There is no doubt about it. It's not going to be easy. People are going to be trying to give it to Josh Allen, as we've seen all season long. But for my money, he is the MVP this season. Josh Allen had a couple of games that has been absolutely terrible. And I'm not saying you have to be perfect for every single game to win the MVP award. I'm well aware of that. But when you go game by game, break it down, especially over the last 10 weeks or so, Saquon Barkley has been the best player in football. He's been the most exciting player in football, and he's a guy that I think really does deserve the MVP award. Outside of that, some other awards that have been a little bit more up for discussion, one of those being the Coach of the Year award. And this is an extremely, extremely deep year for Coach of the Year, right? You obviously have your leaders in the clubhouse, your Mike Tomlin, who's always going to be in the race, your Dan Campbell with the Lions and what he's doing, Kevin O'Connell with the Vikings, a team that was expected to be bad this season after injuries to the quarterback position and losing Kirk Cousins. You have a whole bunch of options like Jim Harbaugh in there, coming over to the Chargers and making them a playoff team. Sean Payton making the Broncos a playoff team with a rookie quarterback. That's 5 guys. There's a couple more that could make the list here. It's an extremely deep year for Coach of the Year, and if I'm being honest, I have no idea which way this award is going. There's a lot of ways it could. I'll tell you a guy that I'm not giving to, and it's Mike Tomlin. I love what he's done this year. It's been huge. But that defense was already basically in place, and with so many options, he's probably 5th on my list. Another guy that I think I'm avoiding a little bit is Sean Payton. He's had a tremendous year. So my top 3 right now for Coach of the Year, it's going to be Dan Campbell for what he's done with the Lions. I thought Dan Campbell should have won it last year. Did not end up happening. We're also looking at a guy in Jim Harbaugh that I think should get a lot of love, and Dan Quinn should get a little bit as well. But I'm leaning towards Dan Campbell to get it. He's been incredible as a head coach. He built a great staff. His team, 10 straight wins. That's incredibly hard to do in the NFL at any point for any team, and it's super cool that he's changed the culture of the Lions completely around. This is a guy that I think deserves to win Coach of the Year. I don't know how he has not yet. And the last one that I thought was interesting was Comeback Player of the Year award. There's been some debates around this award, especially when we talk about what the spirit of this award is. Last year, it ended up going to Joe Flacco over Damar Hamlin. I thought that was a mistake. There is an award in the NBA, Most Improved Player. And that is a different award than comeback player, right? Comeback implies that you're coming back from something, right? Either an injury or something along those lines that's held you back, and you come back and you play great football. Most improved is a different award. And if you want to treat it like a most improved player award, we're talking much different discussions. We're taking a look at a lot different guys than are currently in it. So they're still trying to treat it like comeback from injury, because when you take a look at the guys that are at the top of the odds list for the comeback player of the year award, we're looking at guys like Joe Burrow coming back from injury, Kirk Cousins coming back from injury. You have Aaron Rodgers was up there for a little while. It should have been J.K. Dobbins. This was his year. This was his award. And then he goes down for injury on the IR, which somehow takes you completely out of conversation, even if he will be back and has played most of the season. So now it's just a toss-up. Joe Burrow is going to be in there as well, and I think this is his award right now. You take a look at the number. He's not going to win MVP, but he deserves to be awarded for something. I think Joe Burrow is your comeback player of the year award. It's going to be interesting, though. I don't know if they're going to give it to a player that makes the playoffs, if it's going to be on success-wise or just numbers. But I think Joe Burrow is the guy that wins that award. Outside of that, everything else has been kind of the same. Nothing much else has changed. We've still got a pretty much two-horse race in the Offensive Player of the Year. The Offensive Rookie of the Year is going to be an interesting one. I think it should go to Brock Bowers here. Now, I understand he's not a quarterback, but he is the only rookie that's playing at an all-pro level right now. Jaden Daniels, well, he's been awesome. He's won 8 Rookie of the Week awards. That is something to keep track of. The voters that give out the awards in week, they're not all the same voters, but you kind of get a mindset for how the voters are thinking. It's an interesting thing. It's probably going to go to Jaden Daniels. He jumped off quickly, and the Raiders have been really bad this season, so there's not a lot of attention on Brock Bowers. But what Brock Bowers is doing, he's currently 4th in the league, the entire league, in receiving yards. He's going to break records for receptions, for receiving yards as a rookie, not just a rookie tight end, but as a rookie. He's already on pace to have the best rookie tight end season since the turn of the 2000s. It is incredibly impressive what he's been able to do on a Raiders team that, mind you, has flip-flopped and flip-flopped again between quarterbacks. This is not an easy thing to do when you're constantly having to build a rapport with multiple different guys back there. He's been great. He is my Rookie of the Year, and I don't know why other people are refusing to admit it. But that's where we stand right now in the NFL awards. Let me know what you think. Who's winning all of the NFL awards, the big 5 or 6? I'd love to hear your thoughts. We're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, some news surrounding Bill Belichick. Where might he go this next season after taking a year off from coaching? One of the best coaches of all time. We'll see where he might go. We'll talk about that next, coming up on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Thursday, December 5th. If you are just tuning in, we just finished going over where we stand right now with the NFL awards. In this segment, we turn our attention to some coaching news. Bill Belichick has some news about where he might end up after this season. Some discussions came out earlier, right before our show. We're going to talk about some potential landing spots for one of the greatest coaches in the history of the sport. But before we get into that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Thursday, December 5th. But like I was saying, we are going to get into our final segment of the show, a little bit about Bill Belichick. A report came out today, right before our show, that Bill Belichick was talking to University of North Carolina, about an open vacancy. Could we see Bill Belichick go to college football? It's a much different world in college football now that NIL has entered the picture. I'm not sure exactly if that's what he wants to do. Now, I'm not in his brain here, and obviously, I expect him to get an offer in the NFL. That's what I think is going to happen, but college is an excellent avenue for him to go to. That would be really good for recruitment. You think about these guys that would hear the name Bill Belichick and say, oh, I want to go play for one of the greatest coaches in the history of the sport. Maybe he can get some connections for me at the NFL level. That would be huge for recruitment. I'm not sure how he would do as a college coach. He spent a lot of time up in the NFL, and the way that you coach in the NFL and in college are incredibly different. We've seen incredibly successful college coaches, some of the best college coaches ever, come up to the NFL and struggle. Recently, we saw Urban Meyer completely fail with the Jags. We saw Nick Saban not be successful when he came up and coached the Dolphins, right? There's a couple of them that have come up to work. Pete Carroll did a great job, but it doesn't always translate, right? Bill Belichick is a guy that I think could coach anywhere. I'm not worried about that. But when you look at some of the openings in the NFL, I think they might be a little bit more enticing to him, right? He's so close to breaking the all-time coaching wins record. I just don't think he coaches his last couple of years in college. Maybe it's a quick stopover, but a team that really, really shouts Bill Belichick to me this offseason is the New York Jets. Right, the New York Jets are a team that if you are a smart coordinator or position coach that has an eye on a head coaching position and you're young, you do not want to attach your wagon to. That is a ship that is in the midst of burning and sinking to the bottom of the sea. That is a place you go if you are an old coach, a coach that has retired, already has a legacy, and just says, hey, I'd like to get back in the game and try and fix this dumpster fire, try and patch the leaks that are going on. That feels like a place that you only go if you are a old coach, not a young coach trying to kick off your career. I think that would be a huge mistake. Now, I don't know what the Jets are looking at here. Maybe they want young blood to come in and completely restart. If they want to completely restart, maybe that's where you go. But if they want to just push forward with this Aaron Rodgers team for one more season, like I think they're going to do, like I think they should do, you're looking at guys like Bill Belichick, like Rex Ryan. I've heard his name be thrown around. And I think Bill Belichick is the guy going to the Jets after he spurned them earlier on in his career, just to coach one more year or two, get Aaron Rodgers in there. Maybe they're able to make something special happen. But let me hear your thoughts. Where do you think Bill Belichick is going to go? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. But thank you, everybody, so much for tuning in to today's episode of Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I've been your host, Jeremy Lapidus. We will be back tomorrow talking game picks, NFL, college football, as we get ready for championship weekend. We'll talk about everything, that, and more coming up tomorrow. I'll see you then. You all have a good one. Bye-bye.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn it.